Dear Heavenly Father, thank thee so very much for this day. Thank thee for the opportunity that we have to be on class today. And thank thee so much for Brother Birch taking the time to meet with us and talk with us about coding and helping us to learn. And please bless that he'll start feeling better. And please just help us to have the spirit as we learn today, that these things will be able to stay in our minds and that we'll be able to put them to good use. And we love thee. We thank thee for this opportunity to learn. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, number 1, match each control structure to its correct definition. So we have sequence, selection, and repetition. Cause the computer to execute statements in the order that they are written from top to bottom is sequence. Selection causes the computer to select one group of statements to execute and another group or groups to skip. And then repetition causes the computer to repeat a group of statements. Number 2, each of the following code snippets is an example of a control structure. Match each code snippet to the correct one. So we have sequence right here. It looks like we have 3 statements here. That subtotal equals 175, that tax equals subtotal times 0.06, and that total equals subtotal plus tax. Okay, so very sequential. All these will just be executed one by one. Selection, okay, we have an if-else statement, and conditionally this if block will get executed or this else block will get executed based on this Boolean expression, sales is equal to 1,000. And then repetition, we have a for loop, okay? And I think most of you guys got these two right. The following if statement contains an error. Rewrite it so that it is correct. Assume the variable age already exists and holds a valid number. Okay, this error right here, it's just missing parentheses around the age is less than 8. The following if statement contains an error. Rewrite it so that it is correct. Assume the variable age already exists and holds a valid number. This one right here, notice it says contains an error. It isn't a syntax error, it's a logical error. If I ran this in the browser, it would run just fine, but it would always be true because this statement assigns the value 21 to the variable age. And by doing that, it'll be like, hey, I was able to successfully change this variable, so it's true, and it'll always be true, and age will always be 21 after this is executed. So this needs to be a double equal sign. We should never have a single equals inside of an if statement. The following if statement contains an error. Rewrite it so that it is correct. Assume the variable age already exists and holds a valid number. Age is greater than or equal to 30. This semicolon should not be there. Okay. The following if statement contains a logic error, not a syntax error. Rewrite it so that it's correct. So if 18 is less than age or age is less than 30. Okay, so if I was going to think about this, if age is less than 30 or 18 is less than age, this will be true 100% of the time. So I think the logical error here, the easiest way to fix it would be to make this an and sign in the middle, because then we'd be saying that our age is between 18 and 30. You probably could have written that another way as well, to say that age is greater than 18 or age is, well, we should just stick with the and. I think that's the easiest way to fix it. Number 7, given the following JavaScript code, what will the computer output for the user to see? X equals 1, Y equals 11, message equals welcome. If X is less than 2, true. If Y is greater than 10, true. Message gets the value of hello, and then this gets skipped, that gets skipped, and we'll output. Oh, Y is not greater than 10. Sorry about that. So if X is less than 2, that's true. We'll come into here, but that's false. And this if statement doesn't have an else statement. So we'll skip over all of this, and then we'll come right down here, and then message at the end, it never changed. Because even though we went into this if block with the X is less than 2, we never executed any of these other pieces of code to change the message. So it'll just be welcome. All right, any questions? We're going kind of fast. I would assume that you guys would stop me if you had a question. Okay. After the computer executes the following code, what value will be stored in the variable result? Okay, so x equals 2, y equals 6, z equals 5. And then result equals not x is less than 3. So this is a Boolean expression right here. And I know that because I could put this exact same thing into an if statement or a while statement. So this is a conditional, this is a Boolean expression. So x is less than 3. Is that true? Yes. So because 2 is less than 3. But then I negate that whole thing. And so result would be false. After the computer executes the following code, what value will be stored in the variable result? X equals 2, y equals 6, z equals 5. Result equals, again, this is a Boolean expression. Okay, so I'm just gonna be like, hey, is this true or false? So x is less than 3, true. And y is equal to 6, that's false. And this is an and so this whole thing would be false. Oh, sorry, I was looking at z. Y is equal to 6. So this side's true, 2 is less than 3. This side's true, y is equal to 6. And so this whole thing is true. All right, number 10. After the computer executes the following code, what will be stored in the variable result? Okay, again, a Boolean expression. It's either going to be true or false. X is 2, x is greater than 5, that's false. Or y is equal to 6, that is true. And so one of these sides is true, and it's an or, so result is true. Number 11, after the computer executes the following code, what value will be stored in the variable result? X is equal to true, that is true. And y is greater than 5, which is also true, because y is 6. This is our exclusive OR that we don't look at very often. With the regular OR statement, with the double pipe, it could be either one is true or both is true for it to end up being true. With the exclusive OR, it's either one or the other. If they're both true, then the statement is false. And so in this case, both of these are true, and it's an exclusive OR in here, and so it would be, result would be false.
So I had a question.
Yeah.
So when it's more so, it's not like, so when the inspect, and you took that code in and you figure out what results is, so for the ones before it, it would come out with like true or false. It would specifically say that. Then when I did this one, it would say 0 as false, but it would just say 0. So is it I forgot what we just called it, the exclusive OR? Does that make it say 0 or 1? Or...
It does. Yeah, and that's a really good catch, and it's a really good question. So in programming, and Samuel, you know this, 0 is equal to false and 1 is equal to true. If you think about binary,
yeah,
that's but it is the exclusive OR that makes it actually return 0, as opposed to returning the text true or false.
Yeah. Okay. Because I was just confused. I was like, all right, am I doing this right?
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting question. And if you look at this, I don't know how well you guys can see this. We've talked about these just a little bit on our last test, but this is a regular expression. And right here it says that I'm expecting either the text false, capital or lowercase f, or 0. Okay, and here same thing, true or 1, true or 1. And so if you had put 1 or true or 0 or false on any of these, you would have been just fine. But to answer your question, it is that exclusive OR that returned that 0.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. After the computer executes the following code, what value will be stored in the variable result? X is less than 3, true. And y is less than 7, true. Exclusive OR, z is not equal to 3. So that's true also. So because this is an exclusive OR, and both of these are true, that's false. And so looking outside of these parentheses, we have true and false, so the whole thing's false for this result. Use De Morgan's law. Okay, this is just awesome. We all love De Morgan's law. Okay, not A or B, not A and not B, to rewrite and simplify this if statement. So we have if, I'm going to look outside of this negator real quick. So we have x is equal to 3 or y is less than 0. And if I negate this whole thing, here's what it would look like swapped, okay? Basically swapped. So if I take out that negation operator, if I take out the exclamation mark, we end up with x is not equal to 4, okay? Because you could think about this. You remember like back in school when we would like do multiplication and you put like a 5 in front of something with parentheses, and like the teacher would like draw on the board that you have like arrows and you have to like multiply 5 by like each chunk inside the parentheses. It's kind of the same thing. So we have this negation operator, and I have to basically like imagine my arrows here. So I have like an arrow here to like negate this guy, and then one over here as well. And so we're going to say x is not equal to 4 and y is greater than or equal to 0. And that is the exact opposite of this without the negation operator, and it is the exact equivalent with this negation operator.
So just to double
Yeah.
check my understanding of this, ors get changed to ands and ands get changed to or?
Yes.
Always, or?
When you're talking about De Morgan's law, yes.
Okay.
They always will, and then it'll basically just be like the opposite. So if we had said like y is greater than 0, then here we would have said y is less than or equal to 0. You know, so you just like swap everything, including the or and and.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And you probably never really need to know that in a professional environment, but you might need to know it on another test, for which I apologize. But yeah. Consider this if statement. So let's look at this real quick. We have x is less than 3 and y is equal to 7, or y is not equal to 7. Which of the following statements is equivalent? Will give the same result. So let's just walk through this and talk about why each one of these is wrong and why this one's right. So x is greater than 3, that looks good, or y is equal to 7. Okay. So that right there, automatically we know is wrong, just because right here we have, for this first statement, we have an and y is equal to 7, and that changed our logic right there. The second one, we have x is less than 3 or y is not equal to 7. Okay, looking at that, we have or y is not equal to 7 here for the second chunk. And so either one of these could be true, or sorry, if both of these are true or this one's true, then our if statement will equate to true. So right here, I could say x is less than 3 or y is not equal to 7. Because right here, if I have y is equal to 7, I can basically just rule that out, because right here, if y is not equal to 7, then I already know this is going to be false anyways. And so I could just say x is less than 3 or y is not equal to 7 because of that. The next one here, we have x is less than 3 and y is equal to 7. That would be true if it weren't for this second chunk right here, okay? Because regardless of what x is, if y is not equal to 7, then this if statement would be true, and that's not being depicted here. And then right here, x is greater than 3, that's just wrong, because that's like the opposite of this right here, and y is equal to 7. All right, which of the following is a post-test loop? Okay, our do while is our only post-test loop in JavaScript. And all that means is the code inside the loop will get executed, and then we'll run our check to see if we should repeat it again. All the other ones, they have that check beforehand, and then they run the code inside the loop. Given the following JavaScript code, how many times will the computer display the word flowers? I is equal to 3, while I is less than 7, I plus plus. So while I is equal to 3, 4, 5, and 6, it will display flowers. Given the following JavaScript code, how many times will the computer display the word goodbye? I is equal to 0, while I is greater than 3, I plus plus. So the way our loops work is the first thing that will happen is this let I equals 0. I will get assigned first. And then we check this Boolean condition and says, okay, if I is greater than 3, we'll go ahead and run the code inside of our loop. Well, 0 is not greater than 3, so that's just false. and it would jump down to the next line of code after our loop. Okay, if this had been true, we would have alerted goodbye and then jumped back up here to increment I and then back to our Boolean check. Where it's false, we just jump down here and goodbye never gets alerted. The following for loop contains errors. Rewrite it so that it is correct. Let's see here. I think the only one here is just the commas should be semicolons. Everything else here looks good. Number 19, write a defining table and a JavaScript program that reads two numbers from two text fields and then outputs to a div true if both of the numbers are greater than 5 or if their sum is greater than 20. Otherwise, your program should output false to the div. If you wish, you may use the following HTML code to begin your program. All right. Oh, good. We got some test cases here. So I'm just going to copy. Really? No, it's not going to let me copy it. So we'll just do this from scratch. That's okay. All right. Yes. Let me make that. Oops, not that one. Make that a little bigger. Close that. And I'm going to make a new file in here, and I'll call this exam2.21temp.html. Okay, exclamation mark, tab, there's my little template. All right, let's see here. So let's start off with our defining table. So I'm going to start off my multi-line comment here. And I'll say input, processing, and output. Okay, input, two numbers. Output, true or false to a div. And the processing, so let's see. So it'll output true if both numbers are greater than 5. So I'll say if both numbers are greater than 5, true. Or if their sum is greater than 20. If their sum is greater than 20, true. Else, false. Okay. I think that'll work for our defining table. Let's go ahead and write the HTML here. So we have a couple of inputs. And I'll just say ID. I'll copy theirs 1, an ID of 2. And then we need a button. I'll say onClick. I'll just call it calculate. And then we need an output div. I'm going to copy this right here. Come up here, say function, paste, curly braces, and then we can write our function. So I need to get these two things. So I'm going to copy these, hit Control C, and I'm going to paste them up here. Little hotkey for you guys, Control Shift L will add a cursor onto each line in a selection. So I selected those, hit Control Shift L, and I'm going to say var 1 and 2 equals document.getElement by ID, paste dot value. And where these are numbers, I'm going to want to add, I'm going to want to parse these as well. So I'll say parse float. And there is my input. Okay. After that, I'll go ahead and just put my output here as well. I'll say document.getElement by ID, output.innerHTML equals, we'll just call this bool message. Okay, and then up here, we'll say var bool message equals false. Now, the reason why I put this in quotes, okay, because technically this is not a Boolean variable if I just say a text is false. If it was an actual Boolean variable, it would look like this. Okay, notice I don't have any red lines showing up anywhere. This isn't like an error, it's not expecting a variable name here. False is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, as is true. But here it clearly says that it should be a capital F and a capital T for these true false values. So I'm just going to leave it as a string data type with false here. Now, the reason why I declared this as false is because then I don't need an else statement. Okay, I'll just have a simple if statement to say if it's true or not. And if not, then I just won't do anything with it and we'll leave it as false. Okay, so we have our two values. If both numbers are greater than 5, so I'll say if 1 is greater than 5 and 2 is, whoops, 2 is greater than 5. Okay, so there's our first condition. Okay, if 1 is greater than 5 and 2 is greater than 5. If both numbers are greater than 5, then we'll say true. All right, but we also said if their sum is greater than 20. So I'm going to put this whole thing into parentheses. And then I'm going to say, or if, I'll put this in parentheses too, just for clarity's sake. I'll say 1 plus 2 is greater than 20. I think that should work, actually. So if either one of those is met, it says if both numbers are greater than 5, or if their sum is greater than 20. So I said 1 is greater than 5 and 2 is greater than 5, both numbers are greater than 5, or if their sum is greater than 20. And we'll say bool message equals true. Okay, let's go ahead and run this just to make sure it works. All right, so if I said like 15 and 3, it says false. Okay, they're not both greater than 5, and their sum is not greater than 20. So if I said 19 and 3, okay, so that's true. That's good. And if I said 6 and 7, it's also true. 6 and 2, it's false. So I think we're good. Okay. Any questions on this program, you guys?
I don't really have any questions on it, but like on the test, if we did a lot more complicated code than that, I mean, like took up a lot more space. Like, I don't know. I was like, I liked watching this because I was like, oh yeah, that was a lot more simple. But
And that is exactly why we're doing this. You're totally good. All right, let's look at our next one. Write a defining table in a JavaScript program that reads 3 integers, name start, end, and divisor from 3 text fields. Your program must output to a div all the integers between start and end inclusive that are evenly divisible by divisor. Ooh, this is cool. The output integers must be separated by spaces. For example, if a user entered 17, 30, and 5, your program would output 20, 25, and 30 without the quotes, because those are the only integers between 17 and 30 that are evenly divisible by 5. Sweet, let's do it. I'm going to make a new file here, and I'll call it exam22temp.html. Exclamation mark, tab. Let me close that. And let's start off with our defining table here. Oops. Input, processing, output. Okay, input, we need 3 integers. The output is going to be all, what did it say? Output to a div the integers between start and end. Okay, integers between start and end divisible by divisor. Processing. Okay, so I'm thinking we have a loop that loops from start to end with an if statement inside of it that checks to see if it's divisible by the divisor. So we'll say loop from start to end. In here we'll say if I modulus divisor is equal to 0, then add to message string with the space. And I think that should do it for us. All right, let's write our HTML. We have 3 inputs, and let's have an ID. This seems really unoriginal, especially after, well, we have start, end, and divisor. We'll name them start, end, and divisor. So we have start, end, and divisor. I'm holding control while I click to add a cursor onto each of these lines, so I can easily add a break onto each one. depending on
make,
your.
I've
Okay.
seen it before where people do they'll copy and then they'll click something to make it go down. What is that again? So like where you made the 3 lines?
Yeah, so if I have my cursor here, not selecting anything, and I hit Control C, what that'll do is it'll copy the entire line, including the line break. And so if I hit Control V,
you just plop it in.
Yeah. So really all I'm doing is just copying that whole line. And then if I hit Control V, it'll just paste that whole line again.
Okay. Because I've just been going, click the whole line, Control C, click the next line, Control V.
I've been there. I've been there.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so we got our inputs here. Nice break between each one of them. Let's add a button. We'll say unclick. We'll call this one get divisors. I'm gonna copy that. I'm gonna need it in a sec. I'll have a div, an ID called output. Up here, let's go ahead and paste that. Okay, and we should be good to go. So let's get our inputs. Same thing, but I'm going to show you guys a different way. If I select a string in here and hit Control D, it will select the next instance of that string. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control D twice, and I'm going to hit my right arrow, and then Control Shift right arrow, and it will select all 3 of those. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it right there. Let me tab that over. And then same thing as earlier, I'm going to select that and hit Control Shift L. And now I have all 3 of these that I can kind of work with. So I'm going to say var start end and divisor. Oops. Equals document dot get element by ID. I'm pasting again. Dot value. Again, these are numbers. So let's go ahead and parse those. Okay, there's our inputs. And I could rename these anything. It just made it really easy with copying and pasting to just leave them the same names as their IDs. But I could name these like Fred, George, and Shauna if I wanted to. Okay. All right, so we have our inputs. I'll go ahead and do our output as well. Document.get element by ID, output dot inner HTML equals, and we'll just call this message. Actually, I'll call it numbers. Okay, now we have our numbers, and it is going to be a string that we're just going to append to every time we have something that is what we're wanting. Okay, so let's make our loop. We're looping from start to end. So we'll just make a for loop. We'll say for I equals start, and while I is less than end, oh, we got to be inclusive, less than or equal to end, I plus plus. Okay, so that'll get us a nice loop going from start to end. And then in here, we said if I modulus, I'm just going to copy that. If I modulus divisor is equal to 0, put that in a parentheses. If that is true, okay, so we're iterating through here. Let's say the user types in like 50, 100, and 2. Okay, right here we just say, okay, we're starting at 50, so we'd say 50 modulus 2. Is that equal to 0? If it is, then we're going to say numbers plus equals, and we're going to add I plus a space. And I think that should do it for us. Okay, because that'll just keep on looping through. Anytime our iterator is equal to or is divisible by that divisor, then we'll just add that onto our numbers and then we'll output that at the very end. Let's give it a shot. We change that to 2. All right, 3 numbers. Let's try 50, 100, and 2. Okay, well, that looks good. Let's try 17. Okay, so I think this is working out for us. Okay, any questions on this one?
Nope, you just make it seem so easy.
Carolyn, it's okay. It's okay. It's not only that I've been doing JavaScript for a long time, but it's also that I've done this class for a long time. So it's okay. Yeah, I remember. So my first semester with BYU Idaho, I took this class. I took what's now WD230, and I had never seen code before in my life, and it was really, really intense. By the end of the semester, though, I loved it enough that I knew I wanted to continue on that path. But man, that first month, it was just brutal. But it's great. And the more you do it, the better you get and the easier it gets. And then also, I think the more enjoyable it gets because the easier it gets. But anyways. Okay, well, that is your guys' exam. I think that was it. So these are being graded. I think section 22 is already finished. Section 5 will be finished probably by the end of today. But yeah, so any questions about your exam, you guys? Okay. Well, I think I was planning on just not really teaching anything else today, but I probably should since I already have you guys here. Let's pull this up real quick. Oh, we have a new chapter this week. Week 10. All right. Functions. Oh, this is exciting. Functions are important. So a question came up on, I think it was the week 8 peer review discussion in Slack. So I actually wrote some code for the week 8 discussion. I usually don't, but I wrote some code for the week 8 and I posted it on there for you guys to see. And then someone asked, how could I clear those values if I wanted to? So let me actually pull that up real quick. Let me stop sharing just because I don't know what view I have open on Slack. Let me just open this up real quick. So I'm going to our week 8 peer review discussion, and I'm going to try to find my post on there. Okay, let me share my screen again. All right, can you guys see my screen? Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to think of what it was. So I'm just looking at this image. So let me actually run this code real quick. I don't know if I still have this saved. All right, I'm going to copy the path here. I guess I can't from here. So I'm going to hold Shift, I think, and right click. And that allows me to copy this path. That's on a Windows machine. I don't know how to use other types of machines, you guys, so I'm sorry if you're not on a Windows machine. Then I can just paste that here and run it. And so here I can put in an integer, I'll say 50, run function, and says the sum of all the odd numbers up to your number is 625. And then the question that I got was if I wanted to clear this right here so that I could run this function again, how could I clear this? Okay, and let's think about this for a second. Are there any thoughts as to like how I could clear this? Like just thinking through this logically, not programmatically, how could I effectively clear this information?
I think a good question is what is going to be clearing it?
Samuel, I'm struggling to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
I think a good question is to what will be clearing it? Like, will the user be clearing it? Will something internally be clearing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's assume that I want the user to have the power. Okay, if the user wants to try this over and over again and clear it or whatever, I want to just add a button that lets them clear it.
Couldn't you set like another button, and when they click it, it just nukes it back to 0?
Interesting. Yeah, I think so.
I don't know how good that would be, but that's an option.
I think that sounds great. Sierra, were you about to say something?
I was just going to say that I would just hit the refresh button on their webpage.
Yeah, that would work. Okay, well, let's try something here. So I have that code right here. So here's kind of a cool trick. This is just in my downloads folder, and I'm just going to drag it over and drop it on VS Code, and it'll open it up for us. Don't worry about all this stuff. It's just styling. Right here, though, here's my function, get sum of odd integers. Notice that this is a function, okay? We've been using functions for weeks now, like a month and a half, okay? But usually, it's just when the way we think about it is I want JavaScript to execute when the user pushes a button, okay? But every single one of these buttons, we have an onClick attribute that actually calls a function, all right? Now, let's say I wanted to add the functionality to clear some inputs. So I might do something like this, function clear, okay? Now notice I have two functions here, all right? Now, currently this function is not being called anywhere. I could say alert, and I'll say test, and I'll refresh that over in my browser, hit F5, put in 50, run the function. I didn't see any alert pop up. Let's make sure it's actually here in the code. I'll click on sources. And it's right here, okay? But that alert didn't happen. I didn't have that pop up because this function never gets called. Watch this. If I put a breakpoint here and a breakpoint here, and I hit run function, okay, my breakpoint stops inside of get sum of odd integers, okay? And now I'm gonna hit F8 to let it go. And it never hits here. Why? Because I don't have anything that looks like this, get sum of odd integers with parentheses. That is how we call a function. Now watch this. We looked at this a little bit last week. I'm gonna just say get sum of odd integers right here. Okay, now notice this right here is the exact same thing as this right here. It is the function name without the function keyword. This is how you call a function. We've been calling functions from our buttons this whole semester, okay? But if I wanted to call a function from right here, I could. So watch this. Come in here, and I'm gonna hit F5. Now look, that just stopped on the breakpoint, and I did not push a button. Our HTML over here is not even loaded. It's because my computer started running this JavaScript, and it's like, oh, there's a function call, and it just called my function because I called the function right here. Okay, now that's going to give me issues because this isn't going to be able to parse anything because this element doesn't exist yet. It's not on the page because the JavaScript runs a lot faster than the HTML does. Okay, and you can see here's my error. Cannot read property value of null. If you look over here, it says that this value was null, so it couldn't read this. That came up as null. Okay, but I could call this function right here. Now, if I wanted to, let's try calling this clear function. So I'm just going to copy this. Again, the function name without the keyword function, and I'm just going to put it right here. Okay, now, if this works, okay, when the user clicks the button, it'll call get sum of odd integers. It'll go through here, and then it'll display this on our page in our div, and then we should see our pop-up. Let's try it. I'm going to hit F5. I'm going to type in 50, run function. Okay, we're going to come through here. I'm going to put a breakpoint right here because I don't want to loop through this 50 times. I'm going to hit F8. Okay, F10, F10. Okay, notice this just popped up on the page over here because line 50 was executed. Now watch where this goes. F10, boom, right in line 54. Okay, we called that function on line 51, and now we have a different function running. This is amazing, okay? And I'll just hit F8, and here's our alert. Okay, functions. Now, let's try something else. I don't want to call clear from here, and I don't want to pop up. Instead, I want to clear two things. If I look back at my page, I would like to clear this right here, and I would like to clear this as well. So I'm just going to copy this. Actually, I should copy this whole thing because I want to change the value of our input. So for clear, I'll say that is equal to an empty string. And then I want to say this dot inner HTML is also just empty. Okay, so I'm taking these two things and I'm just going to empty them, just literally by assigning like an empty value to both of them. But still, I'm not calling this function anywhere. So down here, I'm just going to put another button. Actually, I'm just going to copy this line. It's got some nice styles in it, and I'll say danger. And instead of calling the function get sum of odd integers, I'll say clear. And we'll say clear for the button text as well. Okay, this stuff right here, this class stuff, is coming from bootstrap. Okay, what this is right here. So all of this right here is CSS. This bootstrap.min.css is a CSS file that is tens of thousands of lines long. And in it, there's a class called button, which will make my button really pretty, and button primary, and button danger. That'll change what my buttons look like. I use Bootstrap all the time, okay, because it's really easy to make stuff look good without me having to do a bunch of work. So I'm going to say 50. I guess that's 59. I'm going to take my breakpoints off. Well, I'll leave one breakpoint in here. And I'll leave that one as well. Run function. Okay, so we hit this function, get sum of odd integers. I'll hit F8. That popped up nicely. And now I'll hit clear. That did not work. I wonder if, interesting. I'm going to call this clear values. I'm just going to experiment here for a second. And I'll refresh this. Say 50, run function, and clear. Yeah, so I think clear, the word clear, is a reserved keyword in JavaScript. Did you see how that didn't run my function? And I checked the button. I'm like, yeah, I'm calling it. And I checked this, and they both said clear, but it wasn't running the function. And so I changed the name to clear values, and now it's working. So it comes into here. If I look at this currently, I'm just going to highlight that. Currently, it has the text 50 in there in our input. Okay, well, I'm about to change that to nothing. So I'm going to hit F10, and you can see that's gone. Has my nice placeholder of please input an integer back there again from line 62. And then if I look at this guy, okay, the sum of all of the odd integers or numbers is 625. And I'm just going to assign nothing to that as well. And you can see that's gone. Okay, so I could add this button and make it call a different function. And that function did something completely different than my other function did. If I wanted another function that said, tell me what day it is, then I could say alert time of day and call a function that has an alert box with the time of day in it. You know, I could make any functions that I want to, and they won't conflict with each other. They won't get called unless you call them. But we can do this, and we can make as many functions as we want. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. Let's come back to here then, and let's learn a little bit more about functions. All right. So here's what a function looks like. Now, this is the first time that we've really gone into parameters. Okay. Usually we just see the function keyword, the function name, and we'll have an opening and closing parenthesis with nothing in between them, and then an opening and closing curly brace with some values in here. If I look back at my program right here, here's my function header is what we call it. There's nothing in the parentheses. Here's another function header, nothing in the parentheses. And then the body of each function. Okay. Well, right here, I see that we have param1, param2, param_n. You might have some functions that have a parameter and some functions that have like a billion. There's no limit to how many parameters that you can have. But based on the function and what it's supposed to do, you might need to have parameters. So here's an example. Let's say that I had a function called, I'm just going to say function compute area of circle. Okay. Now, if I want to compute the area of a circle, what is that? Is that pi r squared? Is that right, you guys? Okay, thanks, Samuel. So math.pi times r. Okay. Now, there's something missing here. I don't have r. Okay. If I wanted to compute the area of a circle, I have to have the radius. Okay. Now, the way that we've been getting our data all along is by saying document.getElementById, and that's how we retrieve our data from other places in our applications. But I could also put r right here. And now, as long as when I call that function, I pass in a piece of data, then it'll work. So I'll say compute area of circle, and I'll say 50. Okay, I can pass in a piece of data as a parameter, And then guess what's going to be in R when this function starts running? 50. And so it'll say pi times 50 squared. All right, and I could do all sorts of stuff with that. I could say, let's go ahead and alert this right here. So I could say var area equals that, and I could say I want to alert it. Okay, let's see what happens. So right now, this is just going to run. I'm actually going to comment this stuff out for now. It might throw an error before we get this far. So this function will get declared, and then we'll go ahead and call it before the HTML even loads. And let's see what happens. Okay, notice that it's about to call this. I still have the debugger here, and there's the area of our circle. Okay, and so it's really cool because now anytime I want to compute the area of a circle, I never have to ask all my students again what the formula is to compute the area of a circle. Okay, instead I can just, it's just here. And I can just say, okay, I'm going to compute the area of a circle. I know I need to pass in R. You see this, how it says, oh, this is a function, compute area of circle. And there's an R right here. I could even name this radius. Okay, but I could look at this function and be like, okay, it's expecting a radius. So as long as I give it a radius when I call it, then this code will run and it'll be great. Okay, it's just a way to pass data into a function to make that function more reusable. All right. So we talked about this as our header or signature of our function. We always have the keyword function when we declare a function. Function name, parameter list, the body of the function. Okay, we good? Questions on this?
A couple of questions.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just clarification. So we have to separate them with a comma, like it
Yes.
says right there. And then if we want to skip one of the variables, say like parameter 1 we didn't care about, but we needed parameter 2 and parameter n. Like
Yeah.
somehow they got parameter 1 from somewhere else. Do you just blank comma, then parameter 2, then parameter n?
That's a really
Or-
interesting question. It depends. Yes, you could have it be a blank. You would have to, at the very least, you'd have to do that because our computers aren't smart enough to be like, oh, that's a radius and that's a diameter.
Yeah, it's going to pull a number, whatever it needs.
Yeah. So if I have 3 parameters and I only need the second 2, I would have to have just, it might look like parenthesis, comma, if I don't need that piece of data.
Okay.
That's pretty rare. Generally what will happen, so let's say I had a compute area of circles, and then I had like 50 and another parameter, and say I have like 3 circles or something like that. So I'll say radius and then number of circles. This isn't that good of an example because I'd probably want a bunch of radiuses, but that's okay. But anyways, let's say I didn't want radius. Okay, now you might try to do this. It looks like it's going to throw an error. Okay, and we could check this. I'm just going to save this and come over into here and hit refresh. And yeah, it's giving me a nice big old error saying unexpected token, comma. So instead, what I would have to do is pass in something. Okay, maybe I just say like false. Okay, that at least will just be like, you know, it'll be a false value. So as long as I have something in here to check for that, then I'd be fine. With this example, I can't compute an area of a circle without the radius. And so it doesn't really work in this context. But in industry, anytime you have a function where you don't need a piece of data, you'll have something in that function to say, hey, if this data is not null or is not false, I could also pass null into here. Then we'll go ahead and proceed. Great question. All right. Example of how to use a function. So we have average, A, B, and C. Sum equals A plus B plus C. Average equals sum divided by 3. And return average. Okay. Now this return is an interesting thing. We haven't really talked about this before, but what this will do, coming from a control structure standpoint. So let's say instead of alerting area, I said return area. Now what's going to happen is, let me put an alert here just to blow some minds. Now what's going to happen is the JavaScript will go down and it'll see this alert. Okay, for it to alert something, it has to know what to alert. So it's going to come into here and be like, oh, I have to call this compute areas of circles or area of circles. So it'll go ahead and call this function. Now, once this function runs, we say var area equals this, return area. That data was like 50,000 or something last time we ran this, but that data, that area, when we say return, it will return this area to the function call point, which is right here. So right here, if area was going to be like 75, then this alert statement would end up being just 75. Okay, so before it alerts anything, it'll run compute area of circle, do the math, return area to the call point, and replace this whole thing with the area that was computed. Okay, so that's what return does. Let's see, calling a function. We already talked about this. We've been calling functions from our buttons the entire time. And then we have another example down here at the bottom. I'm going to stop moving my mouse so that thing won't come up again. But down at the very bottom, we have draw circle, x, y, and radius. That is a function call. How do I know it's a function call? Because I have text with parentheses and no function keyword. All right, so with that definition, I could be like, oh, well, I have several functions in here that I'm calling. Parse int is a function. Text, parentheses, parse int is a function. Parse float is a function. Get element by ID is a function with one parameter, an ID. Okay, so we've been working with functions this whole time. Alert, yes, it's a function. Okay, because I have a name of something and then parentheses, and it looks like it has one parameter, a piece of data to alert to the user. Okay, so we have lots of functions, and we've been doing them. We've been using them a lot through this whole semester, even if we haven't recognized that. Okay, any questions on this, you guys? Okay. Let's keep going. Returns and assignments. Compute and returns the average of 5 numbers. Okay, so check this out. Function average, we have Daddy, Mommy, Hannah, Emily, Clara. I got to add William onto this. Sum will be Dad plus Mom plus Hannah plus Emily and Clara. That would throw a huge error. Dad and Mom will be undefined, but that's okay. Var average equals sum divided by 5, and we'll return average. So check this out. I call this average function right here. No keyword function. We just have the function name average, and then parentheses with the same amount of parameters as we have listed in the function header. So it looks like these are heights of these 5 family members. And then it'll go in, get the average, and return that average. Let's say the average is like 50. Okay, 50 will get returned and will be assigned to Birch family average height. Questions on this one?
So it's not necessarily for just this, but so it looks like for these ones, like we are putting the values in for those, right? For these kind of functions, can you do it to where it calls something like from like the user input, like? Or...
Yeah, so it's interesting because with vanilla JavaScript, when I say vanilla JavaScript, I just mean plain JavaScript, which is what we're learning. That data, we've been retrieving it the correct way, where we say document.get element by ID. That's how we get data from the user. With that said, a lot of the time, there'll be more than one thing that you want to do with a piece of data. And so you will still have functions that use document.get element by ID, but then you will call other functions to allow your code to be more modular. Okay, because like this right here, this average function I could reuse over and over and over again if I wanted to call it a bunch of different times. Obviously, this looks strangely specific to my family, but if it weren't so, if I said, maybe I had a function said the function will average 5 numbers or average an array of numbers, then I could just reuse that as many times as I wanted to. And so you'll be writing programs that you'll have a function that will like retrieve data from the user using get element by ID, and then you'll have functions that will use that data in other ways. So, all right, variable scope. Okay, so this is important. What time is it? 3 minutes? I don't know. Okay, all right, we got this. So if I declare a variable inside of a function, it is only available inside of that function. If I declare a variable outside of a function, I can use it inside of other functions. Now, this might sound confusing, but if you think about it, We often refer to this as like parent and child scope. So inside of a function, that could be like our child scope. But if I declare something globally or in the parent scope, then it is available to all of the stuff alongside it. Okay. So right here inside of square area, I declared var area. And inside of rectangle area, I declared var area. These are two completely different variables, even though they have the same name, because they were independently defined inside of two different functions that have nothing to do with each other. But this total score, because I declared it outside of the functions, I could use it anywhere inside of all of my functions. So if I wanted to modify a total score, I could just say, oh, Nathan scored or Sarah scored, and just add that onto total score, and it would change this global variable. Okay, questions on scope, you guys?
Are global variables as frowned upon as in C++?
They're as frowned upon in JavaScript as they are in C++, as they are in any programming language you'll ever come across.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just frowned upon. So the way you mitigate that is you use parameters. So for anyone who doesn't know, Samuel took CS124 from me a couple semesters ago, and we talked about global variables and how they're bad things, because a lot of the time global variables will get changed or not get changed when you expect them to get changed, or you try to use it, or you have too many and you can't like name things without messing up other variables. There's a huge list of issues. Our programs are pretty small. We're talking like 50 lines of code on average each week. But you go to work at a job and it's like tens of thousands of lines of code across like hundreds of files. And so if you start having global variables, it's really, really bad and can cause a lot of issues. So yes, they're frowned upon regardless of language. And then yeah, the way to fix that is just, if I wanted to pass in total score somewhere, I would just add a second parameter here, have a total score and that score to add to it. Why use functions? Control of execution, code reuse, less code. Okay, you're like, oh, but I have to like declare a function line. And it's like, yeah, that's 2 lines with the closing bracket too. But you write less code, because now every time I want to get the area of a circle, I can just call my get area of circle function. And anytime I want to average my family's height, I can just use that instead of having to do math over and over again. Fewer coding mistakes. Because I don't have to write out those formulas over and over and over again, I have fewer coding mistakes. Better organization, easier to read and understand. If I have good function names to go along with my functions, my code will be way easier to read and understand. Easier to debug, faster execution, and variable name reuse. All right. Quick note about return and output, and then I'll let you guys go. Return means to return a value to the call point of a function. Okay, we looked at that. I said var Birch family average height equals, and then I called the average function with those pieces of data. It doesn't show anything to the user, and it's good for assigning variables from functions, which is what we did at the Birch family average height. Output means to show a value to the user. What we have done with our programs to show stuff to the user up to this point, we've done a couple of alerts. We've done a lot of document.getElementById.innerHTML. Okay, so that's output, something that'll actually display to the user. Return does not ever show anything to the user. It just returns data to a call point. Okay, so in this code, if I wanted to, so look at this. Is this return or output?
Return.
Yeah, so we have both working right here, right? So our function, compute area of circle, it's not outputting anything, okay? And I know that because in these 2 lines of code, there's nothing that will be displayed to the user. Instead, it does some math and it returns an area. Well, that area will get returned to this call point, okay? So it might be like 75. And then here is our output, this alert in this case. If I wanted to use document.getElementById, I could just say document.getElementById. And then maybe I assign this to a variable like our circle area. Okay, and then I have to take that off. And if I had like an output div, okay, and this would be our output. Okay, so we have function returns, where we're just kind of moving data around in our programs. And then we have outputs, which is when we use document.getElement by ID or an alert, or document.write or something along those lines. Okay. All right, any questions, you guys? Okay, hopefully this helps. I love functions. I absolutely love functions because it makes life as programmers easier and better and more enjoyable and more organized and just better. So, okay, well, you guys, thanks for coming. Thanks for your participation. And I hope you all have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Birch. Hope you feel better.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, get feeling better.
Can I confirm this